Okay, the Lord be with you.
And also with
And
you.
also with you.
Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we thank you for this beautiful day, reminding us of the promise of spring. We thank you for the ability to come together to pray and laugh and study your word. We pray you will send strength and comfort, healing and needed peace to Don and Rebecca, Jeff and his sister, Kristen and Annabelle. Be with us as we read this lesson from your son, Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, well, we're going to take a look at Matthew 20, verses 1 to 16, which is the parable of the laborers in the vineyard. So I'll give you guys a minute to find that spot.
Matthew 20, right?
Correct. Matthew 20, verses 1 to 16. Raise your hands when you get there so I know we're all ready. Okay, is everybody there? Seems like we are. Before we jump in, a couple things I just wanted to set the scene a little bit for this parable. So we're in the book of Matthew, and just to remind everybody, Matthew is really grounded in the Old Testament and in Jewish thought, and there was some early church identity crisis. The audience that Matthew, or whoever the author of the book of Matthew was, were Jewish believers. And so we have Jewish believers and we have Jewish non-believers, and there was tension. And then we also had Gentiles. So there was, some tension going on there. And Matthew deals a lot with righteousness, not righteousness from the law, but righteousness from compassion and justice and enacting that in the world. And we hear through Matthew a lot of harsh words for Jewish leaders, but we should keep that in context that there was a lot of pain happening, and kind of understand that, that context. So Matthew just generally focuses on Jewish customs and prophecies. So that's just to kind of get an overview of where Matthew is situated. But this verse, so we're going to read through chapter 20, the laborers in the vineyard. But I want you to turn back to Matthew 19, the parable right before it. It starts at verse 16. And we're not going to read through it, but I did want to highlight it just a little bit. Your Bible might call it the rich young man. And Jesus goes through some of the commandments. And then this is the spot where Jesus says, it's hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. Okay, so just so we have that spot. But now if you look at verse 27, Peter says, look, we've left everything and followed you. What then will we have? So the parable we're looking at is somewhat an answer to this question of Peter. And look at the very end of that chapter 19, the very last line. It's verse 30, right before we begin on chapter 20. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first. And we're going to hear that again. It's not only was in the parable before this, but in the parable that we're going to talk about together. So they're kind of dual parables, and Jesus was driving home a bit of this point. The parable we're going to talk about today, this is the only spot that it is found in the Gospels. It's just here in Matthew, and it is a bit of a long one. So what I'd like to do is have one person volunteer to be the reader, who will stay our reader while we're together. I would like us to read through the whole thing in one chunk, just to get an overview of what it sounds like. And then I'd like to go back and we'll kind of chop through it verse by verse and see what we can learn from what Jesus is telling us. So do we have a volunteer reader?
Yeah, I'll read.
Who's speaking?
Joyce.
Okay, Joyce, thank you. Let's read 1 all the way through to the end at verse 16. Thanks, Joyce.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to have laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why are you standing here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Then when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Then what belongs to you, and go. I chose to give to this last the same as I give to you. And I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last."
Thanks, Joyce. All right, so before we dive in and start looking at each verse by verse, any thoughts right out of the get-go here?
It ends the same way as the parable before it ends. The last shall be first and the first shall be last.
So what should we take from that?
Last shall be first and the first shall, no.
Well, Jesus is reiterating it, right? So he's told 2 parables back to back with the same conclusion. So he's definitely hammering the thought home.
Right, but he says, "Are you envious because I'm generous?" Well, I don't think they're envious because he's generous. I think they're envious because they feel it's not fair. Why does this guy have more than us?
Because he's generous.
No, it's not. No, it doesn't have to do with generous. It's a question of equity. Maybe the guys who worked all day say we deserve more.
Yeah.
But they agree.
If he's generous, he would have given them more, I think.
But they agreed to work for that money. They agreed
Right.
to work for that money.
That's
They
right.
agreed to work for the day. He didn't cheat them. He didn't give them any less.
Right.
He didn't take away from them to give to the last guy who worked only
No,
an hour or
I understand. No, you're right. I mean, in a contract, that's true. I mean, well, how would you feel if you worked all day, Janice?
yeah, but that's not really the thing that they're complaining about. They're not complaining that they worked all day.
Joe's hitting right on the point, though, that Jesus, as you know, because you guys have been studying parables are always this getting this surprising, unexpected something or other going on, right?
Yeah.
So that's the point. Jesus wanted to say something a little shocking. So Joe's, reception of that is pretty much what Jesus was thinking was going to happen. That was the reaction that they were going to have. That this was going to be, hey, what are you talking about? What are you talking about here? How fair is that? Any other thoughts just initially here before we dig in closer?
I think Jesus is saying we are all equal.
So that's what you feel the overall message is. Okay. All right, so Joyce, why don't you just read verse 1 for us, and let's see what we can learn from that.
Verse 1 of 20.
Verse 1, yeah, one to just verse 1 only.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard.
All right, so we have the kingdom of heaven analogy. So Jesus is setting us up right from the get-go, right? So he's making an analogy here, but there's two ways that we can look at this right here at the start. The landowner is God, and maybe this is just a landowner. So as we look through this, I want you to kind of keep both of those ways of viewing the parable open to you. What is it saying if we think of the landowner as God? What is it saying if the landowner is just a landowner, and what lessons, can be learned? Just a couple quick things I'd like to point out. It's taking place in a vineyard. Vineyards were all over Galilee. This was a common setting. And we know vineyards were used a lot in the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, as a setting. And the listeners of this story, they already would have understood that the vineyard was the people of Israel, because that's how all of the other previous stories in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Psalms, the people of Israel are the vineyard. So when they started to hear it, that's how their ears would have perked up. And then just a quick thing on the setting. So there were a few powerful owners, and then a whole peasant class, and this is a farming society, right? So no middle class. And we may want to think that this, this story took place at harvest time, because he's hiring so many people. They're working a long day, so it very well have been a harvest time. And just keeping in mind that he's needed all these additional workers, and that there are day laborers, and day laborers may get work and they may not get work. So maybe we should keep that in mind. Anything else on this first verse that grabs anybody that we should think about?
Well, if he's the landowner of a vineyard, he's got to have money. He's got to be pretty wealthy, I would say. Well,
some landowners, certainly not all, but some landowners at that time would find ways to get other smaller landowners indebted to them, and then they would subsume their property. So there was some land owning shenanigans, as it were. They weren't always lifted up as the highest by the peasant class. And so as a parable, that's an interesting play here, that God is, we may want to think of God as the landowner in this situation.
He also, I think it was a harvest time, because he was looking for more and more people to go into the vineyard and work. He was telling all the idlers that was standing around to go into the vineyard. So I think that he probably needed a lot more people at the time of the harvest, and he didn't question them, about can they do the work. He just took them in and said, go to the vineyard because I need your help.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Joyce. Anybody want to comment on what Joyce just said? Like, why does he go back so many times? Does he not know how many he needs? Like, why does he keep going back over there? Or were there only a couple of guys there in the morning, so he had to keep going back looking for more people?
Yeah, we don't know more and more.
And it also might be that maybe some of the workers weren't as quick as such good pickers. It took them longer, and he realized that he needed more men to get the work done by the end of the day, or whatever the time frame was.
Or
Well,
maybe he even had enough people. Maybe he was just being
Being
generous, being kind, and saying, you know, come and work for me. I think about, you see the people lined up in Huntington that want to work, and then people go and pick them up and stuff. And just imagine if that's all the money you're going to get, and you have to wait all day and hope somebody picks you. So you can go home and feed your family and do whatever. And all that worry and concern. I mean, as soon as you get a job, you go, yeah, you have to do the work, but it's like, oh, I got
Sigh
a
of
job,
relief.
we'll eat tonight, and then all of these people just sitting there and worrying about it and having no control over it, just being there, and then this guy keeps going back and saying, oh God, they're still there. Come on, come. Thinking
Yeah,
of the landowners.
I wonder how they get chosen today or back then. Now, how do you choose who you're picking?
It sounds like this is random. He's just taking anybody he can take. He
Yeah.
might feel like he's under the gun about getting this harvest in because the whole thing might be ruined. But he does show generosity in getting people to work and say, really inviting a lot of people. So in that regard, I think he's generous in inviting as many people as possible.
I don't think he's picking and choosing. I think he's taking everybody.
Whoever's there.
Whoever's
Yeah.
there that wants.
Willing,
Yeah.
anybody's
Yeah.
willing to come.
Yeah, anybody who's willing to come, he's taking. That's the way I read it.
All right, Joyce, let's move on to verse 2.
After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard.
So a denarius was the normal rate or fee for a day's labor. It usually fed a family for about 3 days. And he hires the first one. It says early in the morning. Other versions of the text says at sunrise, which should, maybe considered 6 a.m. I just wanted to highlight here Roman day, timing. The day would start at midnight and go to midnight. But in Jewish culture, of course, it would be sunrise to sunset. And I did want to highlight, as we read through this, it says 6 a.m., then 9 a.m., 3, and then 5. So like 5 times during the day, he's going back. These are pretty typical breakdowns of time in Jewish culture. It's they break the day into quarters. It's every 3 hours. And you can see that with, say, when Jesus gets crucified, he gets crucified at 9 in the morning, and then it's darkness at 12. And then at 3 o'clock, he breathes his last kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
so we see those designations. So as you read the Bible, you may want to just, have that perk up in your head, how the day gets broken down, in Jewish culture. Any other thought on verse 2?
Well, he agreed to pay them a denarii for the day, and they said great and went.
So the agreement is something important to highlight there. Great. Okay, Joyce, let's go to verse 3.
When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right."
Right, that's interesting. So they went.
My Bible says, and he says, and I will pay you a fair wage.
Ah,
So they really didn't know going out at 12 o'clock what the fair wage was going to be.
Nope.
It's a little vague, right?
oh, so he brings up the issue of fairness here. What he says, what is right or fair wage? So for people who came 3 hours later.
So so that's something to think about. Is fair and right the same thing?
Mhm.
Is a fair wage what's right? Is fair
And who-
right fair?
In whose eyes somebody assigns that word, to whatever that person decides what is right. That's individual. Anybody.
I wonder if the ones that were working on that second shift, the 9 o'clock shift, when he says, I'll pay you a fair wage, whether they knew what did anybody question the landowner and say, well, I guess they were just glad to get hired. They didn't say, well, what is the fair wage starting now, or
Yeah.
I don't think anybody argued about a fair wage.
they were glad to get hired.
They
I
were
guess.
glad to get hired, yeah.
That's an interesting thing, like what Janet had brought up earlier about maybe migrant day laborers today. Are they told how much that they'll be given at the start of the day? And what if they're not given that amount? Do they have any recourse? Especially if they're not documented immigrants, they have no recourse of where to go to complain about that, right? So those are some things even today that come into mind. And some might say, well, it's a fair wage to get $7. I don't even know what minimum wage is today. But others may argue that might be legally fair, but is it right to pay someone that does this, that, or the other thing, to pay them that amount? Any other thoughts on that? Okay, Joyce, why don't we continue? Verse 5. We on 5?
When he went out again around noon and about 3 o'clock, he did the same.
Keep going, please.
And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, why are you standing here idle all day?
Keep going.
They said to him, because no one has hired us. He said to them, you also go into the vineyard.
Okay, thoughts on that whole section there? This word idle, it makes it sound like, well, they were being lazy or something.
Yeah.
But when you look in the Greek, it's not really this connotation of laziness. It's more just waiting, like a waiting around. But I think that's where sometimes the translation can be a little tricky, because it might make us feel like they were just being lazy.
Well, I think they were waiting around because they wanted to get hired and no one had hired them.
Yeah, it says, why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing? And they said, because no one has hired us.
And then he says, go work in the vineyard.
I think the fact that he's coming again and again during the day is God looking out for us, saying he's not giving up, at least not giving up, without giving you an option. The option is come.
Right.
Janet, say more. I like that. Keep going.
Well, he said come, and because he did, I don't know. I think if you come to God early on, and you're really blessed. You're blessed. You don't have that worry, that concern all of your life. That who are you? Where are you? Where do you belong? What do you the what's to come? All of that. You've got that. You've been paid. You are going to be paid, and so then, but as when you don't have God early on and you struggle, or even if you've had and you're kind of lost and you keep struggling to find him again, and then it's this renewal and you get the whole package. He doesn't decide to give you, well, okay, you can have a little bit because you came later. it's just, that's the way I see, because it said it's like heaven. So, my hope is that's true.
And
Joe,
then,
Joe, you
and
wanted to make a point?
again,
What-
talking about what Joe
Jan-
said about the mentally ill person, we don't, I don't say we, but I say the town doesn't pay that much attention to these people. And hopefully God pays attention to them, because most of them really need his help. Like Joe said, and they don't, they probably don't come to God asking for his help. And I think that lots of times there are a lot of people in the town with problems like that who won't go to God and ask for help. And they are the ones that probably need the help the most.
But then here you are with Hi. Here you are saying, okay, here's an answer. God's hands, us.
Yeah. I think two things. Janet, you said something about God coming after you. And Joyce, you were saying about the mentally ill person. I think that it reminds me of the prodigal son, whereas the first son is, he's not entitled, but it's assumed, that he will have his father's bounty. And the second son, even though he took off and did a whole bunch of other things, he equally will be sought after and loved as equal as the first son. Like Janet, you said, the first person, it's a gift if you know exactly what's going on, but later on, God will still come after you if you're lost, or I hope with that mentally ill person he will, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But it's like the son. You're going to get equal treatment no matter what position you're in.
Yeah, this parable is often compared to the prodigal son. Absolutely. Let me just lift up one little thing. So in Jewish custom, so the sunrise, say 6 a.m. The third hour is 9, and then the 6th hour is 12, and so forth. And when you get to 5 o'clock, that's called the 11th hour, because the 12th hour would be 6 o'clock at night, right? So when you hear that phrase, it was the 11th hour, we can tie it right back to this this parable where they waited till the 11th hour, which would be 5 o'clock. But let me just think of something that Joyce mentioned. When we talked about how do you choose who's there, and maybe they did just pick whoever was there, or maybe they chose, he looks strong and healthy, and that guy, he's a lot older, I won't choose him to work. He's not going to be able to work as fast as these younger fellows. Maybe I'll choose him. Or maybe that one guy, he has that bad leg. He's not going to be able to work as hard. So we're not sure how they were chosen. Maybe they just chose everyone. Or was this landowner choosing, and Jesus is taking this opportunity to lift up those that are maybe older or disabled, or not maybe as impressive as those that were chosen first. And Jesus was choosing those, maybe those that were left out. All right, should we move on? Where are we? Verse 8, Joyce?
Let's see. I'm trying to find where 8 is now. I'm at 9. When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage.
Let me keep going a little bit.
And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.
Okay, yeah, stop there. That sounds exactly like what Joe said, right, when we started?
Yeah.
The
Almost
overall-
verbatim to Joe's comment. So what do we think about all of that?
I think it's interesting that it says, when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to wanted the last ones. Here he was giving relief to the incredible gift and release to the last ones first. They didn't have to wait like the other ones, like they had to wait all day. And yet he was making the other ones who were first look back and watch all this and see what, that God is fair, or that God is generous, or that God he's the owner, he does what he wants, and this is what he wants.
Well, the lesson also doesn't work if you do it the other way around.
Right.
You got to stay with the theme.
Very good, Pete.
Yeah, stay with the theme there.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on that section?
Well, it's the 11th hour, in both cases. The last time he went out was 5 o'clock. He said that was the 11th. And the first, he says then when evening came, well, I guess maybe it was different, but he takes the last first, meaning that you have a chance all the way, no matter what state you're in, you still have a chance at getting, at the kingdom, getting right with God.
It's never too
It's
late.
never too late. Even if you had a little bit, even if you did a little bit, you did a little bit of work, you still got a chance, even if you got A for effort,
Couple things I'd like to just lift up here a little bit. At the 5 o'clock group, the landowner or God addresses them and didn't address the other, addresses them directly. So I'm not sure what we want to infer from that, but that was a little bit of a change. And then some see these first hired as the complaining Pharisees, because again, we're in the book of Matthew. So some see it like Jesus was talking about the complaining Pharisees, and others view it that the Jesus followers were complaining about the Gentiles. So there are other ways that they may have been hearing this that, that we have to kind of tune into, a little bit. And then one other thing was, there's a theologian from the Lutheran School of Theology in Chicago, and he wrote a paper on this parable, and he compared the first hired to Lutheran faithful of German and Swedish descent. That's not my camp, but compared that to last hired, which were, well, who are these new Lutherans that are, African American or of other different ethnicities? So he wrote a whole paper kind of using this parable to just take a microcosm look at the Lutheran denomination and the way that we function. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Was the big division even in colonial America? I mean, at the beginnings of America, that, this wasn't the purest Lutheran, this wasn't the purest Lutheran church. We were the purest from Europe. We're the purest, and there's a lot of divisions there.
So just another way that we might want to, kind of understand this parable a little bit. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? All right, Joyce, let's go to verse 13.
But he replied to one of them, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I chose to give to these last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first and the first will be last.
Okay, thoughts?
I think because he is probably one of the richest landowners, he has the money and the will to do what's right. Maybe he feels that everyone should get the same wage because they probably need it. And I think it's the same with Jesus. I don't think Jesus is going to say, you can't come to heaven because, you're not a very good person. I don't think Jesus says stuff like that to people. I think everybody believes that someday they will be in heaven with Jesus, whether they've done the right or the wrong.
Or if you've been a believer for 5 minutes or for 55 years.
Yeah.
Let me just, this word friend in verse 13, friend, I'm doing you no wrong. It sounds like, let's not be deceived that this word friend is that he's using a nice word here. Matthew uses the word friend a couple of times, and it's usually, in context of not being happy, or it's kind of a chastising sort of word. If you remember at the wedding robe story, he says, friend, how do you show up at this wedding without a robe on? And I think that's in Matthew verse 22, just not long after this. And when Jesus gets arrested and Judas comes up, remember he says, friend, do what you're here to do. So it's kind of a technique that Matthew uses to show maybe displeasure. It's maybe almost in a little bit of a sarcastic way.
Mhm.
So I wanted to lift that up, that don't be deceived that, it could be that he doesn't know their name, so he just calls them friend. But, we should also know that Matthew, a couple of other times, uses that same, uses friend like that, and to show that he's, whoever's speaking isn't very happy.
Sometimes we would, when I was on the job and you had an unruly person, sometimes you would say to them, listen, my friend. And you were kind of disarming him, but at the same time sending a message.
Right. You're not calling him a name, but you kind of are, right?
There you go.
I noticed that the first guys, when they received their money, finally, they grumbled against the landowner. And that's very much like the Pharisees. The Pharisees were always grumbling against what Jesus taught and what Jesus said, because he did things differently than what had been done in the past. He did turn things upside down. And this is another example of what Jesus is doing, turning things on their head. He gives the one who only worked a short time the same as he gives the one who worked the whole time. The last shall be first. But the Pharisees didn't like that.
Yeah, back to it's not fair. But is it right that those people could feed their families as well?
Yeah, but on the not on the other hand exactly, but the parable, Jesus did say, he was talking about the kingdom of heaven. He was using an example of what they could relate to, but he was saying, this is what heaven's like. Not exactly what you'd expect, not exactly what, what the landowner would do, but this is what God does. And then he says, it's mine. All of this is mine. All of you are mine. And so I can do what I want. It's my money. And and you agreed that this is how much you would work for. So it doesn't matter if I give the same to somebody who worked 10 minutes, doesn't matter, because I didn't cheat you. So I just think it gives us a glimpse of God here. It gives us a glimpse of heaven. And that boy, we're all,
Amen.
we're all it doesn't matter when you come or come back, or I think it's very hopeful, but that God is so, we talked about God's abundance for us, and that it's everywhere.
It's about God's mercy and grace and generosity, all of that. Yeah, and it's very Lutheran, right? Because of course it's about God's grace, and it's not how worthy we are or how much we work. It's not about our works. It's about God's grace. So we hear a lot of Lutheran theology in this parable for sure.
And yet, as people, boy, you can really relate. And I think that's why Jesus makes the first group that got paid watch. The first group that got hired, watch while he pays from the lower one up, so that we can get that clue, because we certainly relate to those people that you would think, oh, if he's giving the first, the last ones to work this, what he promised to give us, certainly by the time he gets to us, we'll get more. You can feel that with them.
Janet, I love that. Honing in on that, him making them watch it. It's not about your anger and jealousy, your self-centeredness, your envy. It's about God's goodness and generosity. And I'm going to make you watch it and learn that lesson. Yeah, that's so good.
Not a capitalist society, that's for sure. Not really. And doesn't it also remind you of Martha and Mary? When Martha is working in the kitchen, doing all this work, and this comes and Mary's just sitting down, having a little chat, and Martha comes and says, "Hey, come on, someone help out here," and right. And I think these stories are great, but I think sometimes, I don't know, we are Christians, but you can get a little petty about things. I mean, I admit sometimes, you'd say, hey, that's not fair, you know what? But I think the average person would say, well, it's not fair.
Yeah.
But okay.
Is it fair that we have hungry people in our midst, that we have day laborers that may or may not get paid a fair amount? There's, I think this parable brings up a lot of important things that we can see in our society, right here in our town, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So other thoughts about what this parable is really about? So we started off with God, the kingdom of God, Jesus lesson, and we also is there a lesson on what kind of a landowner, what kind of a boss to be? We can take lessons from both ways of looking at this. Not just as a parable about God, but also as a lesson from Christ about how to be.
Yeah, we can see ourselves in both the laborer or the landowner.
Loving our neighbor.
Right.
And I'm not sure who mentioned, if it was Joyce or Janet maybe earlier, that when we said, well, why did he keep coming back? Did he need? He never says, I need more laborers, I need more workers. He just says, all right, go work in the vineyard. All right, go ahead, just go. So was it just compassion? Was it God's love and compassion? Was it this landowner's generosity and compassion on those that hadn't been hired, and even though they would hung around all day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the keep coming back reminds me a little bit of the lost sheep. The shepherd's always going to go out for that sheep, no matter how many times, he's still going to go out. That's what the landowner does, and that's what God does for us.
Yeah. Any other differing thoughts on that? God's grace is available and to all of us equally.
Mhm.
Yes.
Jesus came for the sick and the sinner and the rejected and the last on the line, the despised, the poor, the orphan, all of that. Pastor Policino, any thoughts on this parable?
Well, just, and also it's a, I guess a word to us about judgment of those who might be late to being a Christian or to believing in God, that, even if it takes you to later in your life to realize that you need God in your life, that God's still there for you to get the full reward of life with God in the kingdom. That, it doesn't matter if you've, been to church every day since you were a baby, or kind of fell off a while and then came back. That's okay. Like the lost sheep, God's going after everybody and welcoming them back, even if we wander away, or even if we don't show up till near the end of the party, that we're still in the party, still welcomed, invited to the party.
Amen.
Amen.
Mhm.
Amen.
Just a question before we close out this section. We have a couple more weeks left of these parables. Are there any parables that we have not done that you wish we would do? Any other parables that you've had trouble with? Any other? Or ones you just like talking about?
Mhm.
Mustard seed. I guess we did that.
Did you
we
do that
talked
one
about
already?
that a little
I
bit,
don't know
yeah.
which ones you've done or haven't done, so I can't chime in.
Right.
Hidden treasure. What's the math? Matthew 13. Did we do the one with the sower? The farmer went out to sow and it went but to weeds and
Yeah, I think that was the first one we did, right?
Did you do the lost sheep and the lost coin?
Yeah, we did
what
that. Yep,
How about the Good Samaritan? Do we do that one?
yeah, we did
Yes,
that.
we-
Prodigal son, the lost Samaritan.
what about the pearl?
What?
Earl didn't really talk about that one. We can do that.
A merchant in search of fine pearls, Matthew 13:45 or 44.
Matthew 13.
13:44 to actually there's about three of them in a row there. 44, 45, and 47.
Okay, we can take a look at those.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah.
We have did we do the wedding banquet or the wedding where the person shows up in the wrong clothes?
No,
No, I think we talked about it in regard to maybe one of the other parables, but we didn't go into it.
Okay.
And what did you do mustard seed and then the yeast one right after that? That's a good combination too.
I don't know if we did that.
I don't
We
remember.
didn't do the yeast. We did the
The yeast,
mustard seed kind of when but we can revisit those.
There's too many, so many.
Yeah.
Mustard seed and yeast. And what else? What was the other?
The widow and the judge, did you do that one yet?
The persistent widow.
Yes.
No, I don't know if we did.
Yeah.
I don't think we did that one.
No.
Sounds like we got choices.
Yeah,
Isn't there one with Lazarus? I'm trying to think. I think it's in Luke.
What was that about? Russ?
Oh, that's the dishonest manager. You guys did that one already, right?
Yeah. Oh, there's another manager one though.
Oh, the Rich Man and Lazarus. That's the one I was thinking of.
Oh,
No, I don't think we did that.
Okay, I just want to know if there was a particular one that you guys had in mind. If you do, email me, call me, text me. We'll add it onto the list. Otherwise, we'll go with this list for next week. And if you think about it during the week, you can let me know next week if there's one we didn't mention that you wanted to do.
the fig tree, do we do? Okay.
Did you do the bridesmaids and the lampstand?
No.
No.
We got one here.
Oh, we got a lot to do. We got a lot to do.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch left. That's why I had them on my
Keep
list.
going.
I figured
Let's just keep going.
if there was
55.
one that you guys wanted to do, yeah.
Mamma
Make
mia.
sure we hit that one. We got plenty.
We got plenty.
We got plenty.
Should
I
we
would
pray?
thank you, Jean, for handling this for me today because I was back and forth
My pleasure. Thank you
making
all for being
lunch
here.
and giving out
Yeah,
medicine. and-
Very, very good, Rika. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, we
Okay, so
really-
let's pray. Let us pray.
Let us pray.
God of justice, thank you for gathering us today. We remember before you those who suffer from any want or lack of work. Guide the people of this land to use our wealth and resources that all people might find suitable and fulfilling employment and receive just payment for their labor and for all their needs. Through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Thank
Enjoy
you.
the little bit of sunshine while it lasts.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody get outside.
Yeah, it's beautiful out there again.
It is nice. It's a little warm too. Sun is strong.
A little tease of the spring.
That's right.
Look for those crocuses growing.
Yeah, soon.
Soon.
Yeah, they come up first.
Yeah, I don't know if winter's done with us yet, but hopefully it would be nice if it was.
We say that
Okay.
today. Next week.
Yeah, I'm
See you all
thinking we're
next week.
probably not done yet, but that's
No, not
okay.
yet, probably not.
Okay,
right.
bye-bye.
All
Take
right,
care.
See you,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye now.
thank you.